Greetings, Craddock here. Wanted to talk a little bit about starting builds for Season 23, in particular for the Wizard. Before we get into that though, I wanted to first off express my enthusiasm for Wizard this season. While having a theme is a good thing, it can help your character out. Oftentimes, the seasonal theme shifts power towards certain types of builds rather than others, so a certain subset only benefits and can take advantage of the theme. You could really see this with the fourth cube slot or the rearrange cube, benefiting like Frozen Orb or heavy multiplier builds, right? And then those other builds have been left behind. Well, this season, it's a little bit more balanced, so there is some good coming from not having a seasonal theme, especially in combination with the new leaderboard filters. We'll get to see exactly where all these multiple sets are going to land in comparison to the other sets. It's going to be a great season for benchmarking. I'm excited to push every single set, even LOD, right? So say Firebirds, Veer, Typhons, and maybe DMO. I'll be playing builds that are maybe not quite meta, but close to meta, and then LOD and Tal Rasha I'll just have some fun with. Anyways, I'm excited for Firebirds, the Firebirds redesign. While I don't agree with every design change they've made, the core of the proc-based playstyle allowing us to hybrid mini skills without having to equip multiplier items is just super great. It's so excellent. It's like, oh my goodness, I love it. But yeah, with that, let's get into the starting build. So the screen that you've unfortunately been staring at is obviously the Blood Shard rolls that you can go for with Kadala. Once you hit level 70, Blood Shard Bag will give you a lot to roll with at level 1. So I'm going to recommend most players just go after either the Etch Sigil or the Winter Flurry. So you can wait till level 33, and then you have a pretty good chance at getting either the Winter Flurry or the Etch Sigil. That's probably the best route to take. However, if you just want to get, boots on the ground, just get going, while there is the option at level 1 of going you'll see a lot of content creators recommending the Poxfolds, which are pretty good. I actually prefer the Heart of Iron if I'm going an early item. You just stack thorns, and this will actually work up until about level 45 or 50, when maybe it's probably closer to 45. Level 45, it still works if you're stacking these thorns secondaries, and it gets you, basically bridges that gap to the point where you can equip your level 70 weapon after that, and then your main damage will take over. So that's a nice casual option as well. I'd actually recommend, if you have extra shards after you get a Heart of Iron, just go for Ashnagar's Blood Bracer, and then if you happen to get both, you can just roll for the source later on, right? So there's a lot of options here for starts, but sources at level 33 is probably the way to go. Notably, it's important to do 33 because at level 34, the source pool increases, right? So just stop what you're doing, roll sources. Now, as far as builds are concerned, we have a couple of different choices for starter builds. Obviously, you could go Twister, you could go Hydra, you could go Frozen Orb, right? So between those three, I think the easiest to set up is going to be a Frozen Orb build, simply because the dagger in particular, the Wizard Spike, as you see here, is 1 out of 3 in the the pool there. So it's quite nice to be able to get such a multiplier earlier on. And also, something that not a lot of players know is that, I think it's, if you look at the wand pool here earlier on, Unstable Scepter is 1 out of only 2 wands that drop early on in season. So you could technically Yeah, until level 34, then the pool increases. But even then, like Wand of Woe, Serpent Sparker, these are good multipliers as well earlier on. So you have a good chance at getting a nice multiplier wand earlier on, and it could be the Unstable Scepter as well. So this is why we're looking at that. Aside from that, you have about, I think, 10 ran the numbers, and because Wand of Woe has a higher chance here, it's about 9.1 out of 9.75 chance at getting a wand if you're upgrading wands. So upgrading rare wands, that's nice. For the LOD build, we will need the Aetherwalker, but if you're going the Taurasha route, you'll actually need the Unstable Scepter, like I was just talking about. And then for the Frozen Orb setup, both builds, you'll be gambling shards on the source at level 70 for getting the Triumvirate. This is a huge multiplier as well. Now, between going Legacy of Dreams or Taurasha with the 4-piece Firebirds, these are both very good starter builds. There are advantages and disadvantages to each, so I'm going to go over those now. LOD is, in my mind, the super casual, like super easy setup. It's smooth progression, and you get a lot of quality of life with the Legacy of Dreams version here, especially. You don't have to worry about casting Disintegrate to get your mobility. Huge plus. Earlier on, your damage multipliers will be less than with the Taurasha setup. Because we don't get that third weapon, we have to fit in the Aetherwalker, but because we're not running Taurasha, it means you can run the Wormhole rune. So you actually move faster with this build through the Rift. It will move faster, it will attack really fast, and it just packs a decent punch to clear risks greater on. It's also really nice defensively because you have the gold wrap in the build to help give you that armor bonus to protect you from... So your squirts drops less, in my opinion, with this build, as even as compared to this build, which has a lot of damage reduction. So there are some niceties here. The cool thing is that you can just get gear pieces that you find. They don't have to be these exact pieces, and in fact, next season, instead of the Swampland Waders, you'll be using the Blackthorn's leg piece, because the Blackthorn's Jousting Mail here will actually roll with an elemental damage affix, just something to note. I just haven't updated it yet on the planner. Elemental damage, of course, going to be one of the high points of this build, getting up to 100%, even with not having the Mage Fist, is pretty huge, right? So I'll go over this build in detail in a little bit, but in general, this is just a smooth option with a lot of quality of life, including the Broken Crown. So something you have to note here with the Follower Emanate system is that you can fit a lot of items on the Follower, the Cain set, the Sages set, but you don't have room for everything, right? If you want a Gloves of Worship and the Cain set and the Sages set, you have to put a Rorg on your follower, you have to put all those items on the follower too, which means you don't have room for a Broken Crown. So the LOD having the Broken Crown, room for the Broken Crown, gives you extra gems earlier in season as well. So there's a lot of things going for this setup. Now, that being said, let's swap over to the Taurasha setup. Taurasha is the Haedrig's next season, so it requires a little bit of effort, because you have to do the season journey, whereas with LOD, you don't have to do the season journey. You just have to level up your Legacy of Dreams gem. But earlier on in season, the LOD build, it means it will be significantly weaker, and this practically goes straight to T16 once you get it. It's I think once I leveled up my LOD gem, and I had only 2 Ancients equipped, I could do T15 fairly readily with the LOD build. T16 was still a little bit out of reach at that power level. It wasn't efficient. But playing this build, low gear, non-ancient weapons, everything, non-ancient pieces, you'll still be able to clear T16. So this is the advantage with going Tau 6 Firebird 4-piece. Another downside is it does require finding more pieces. So you have to find at least 3 pieces of Firebirds, and you have to transmute them to make sure they're in the right slots, because you have to have a shoulder piece, you have to have a boot in a very minimum. The pant slot we have here for the Firebirds could be a helm, could be a glove, what have you, but it's going to take more resources to get into. You have to farm a Ring of Royal Grandeur. Like, you're going to have to farm a Ring of Royal Grandeur for your follower anyway, but you have to farm an additional Ring of Royal Grandeur for yourself for this build. So there is a disadvantage there, but like I said, it is stronger, and it is the seasonal journey this season. So this is why we're presenting these options. It does not have the gold wrap, but it has a lot of damage reduction. So the 4-piece from the from the Firebirds will give us 80% damage reduction and the infinite teleport. So the advantage here is you're able to fit in that extra multiplier item, the unstable scepter, and just devour the rift, right? Because there's so much damage in this particular setup, you don't need to go focus on restraint. I found just going the extra toughness with Halo of Carini, but keeping the Squirt's Necklace was probably is the best combination. You can't go Unity here because the follower doesn't have enough ring slots again. One downside with this build as compared to the LOD setup as well is there's not enough room in the ring slots for an Oculus ring, because on your follower you're going to have Rorg and you're going to have the Avarice Band, right? And in this build we don't have the room for the Oculus ring, but in the LOD, whether you're placing the Oculus ring on your follower and it's emanating, and you're wearing the Avarice Band, or vice versa, this allows you the Oculus ring effect. And this actually helps out significantly for the LOD version, like pushing higher earlier on, because especially when your Legacy of Dreams gem is not leveled up that high, it's kind of a nice thing to have, right? Now, investment-wise, once you get either of these setups, I would say you're more invested in the LOD configuration because you have to level up the gem a little bit more. While you could level it halfway and then transition out of it, you still have to at least level it to 50, right? To have a working build, I think. That can clear T14, T15, something like that. This requires a little bit more investment on the gear side and grinding out all the materials and stuff. Both of these setups, they're temporary. They're not meant to be permanent. You're going to want to try and get into either a Firebirds based Nephilim Rifting setup or a Vircentoto based Nephilim Rifting setup. And either of these options, once you get the gear for them, will be significantly better at clearing Nephilim Rifts solo than as compared to the Tau Frozen Orb or the LOD Frozen Orb, especially earlier on in season. Later on in season, if you spec out the LOD Frozen Orb, it can be a really quick clearing build, but it takes a lot of main stat to get there, right? So, yeah. Anyway, so that's why I think both of these Frozen Orb builds have a place in the early season, and then you're definitely going to want to look for that Firebird 6-piece comp. I would recommend this build here, which I've called the Chaos Wave build, because we're using Heat Wave to proc our Firebird 6-piece combustion stacks. And I've done a full guide on this, so I'll link that as well. But the gist is that the appeal for this build here is that you could start gearing your Firebirds, and using that for your Greater Rift speeds would be a very smooth transition, I think. Granted, this build is not the fastest Firebird Nephilim Rifting setup, but it's the easiest one to get into, because all you need, it's an attack speed based setup. It's no cooldown reduction. All you need is attack speed on the weapon and one roll, either the glove or a ring or whatever, right? So super easy to set up, super easy to get going with. Highly recommended you take a look at this build guide. The other option, as mentioned, is Vircentoto. In my personal opinion, Vircentoto is still the fastest Nephilim Rifting setup for Wizard. Granted, earlier on in season, you might not have quite as much intelligence as required to clear at that super fast level, you know what I'm saying? So, but the addition of the all kills should get you there quicker. So this is why I'm mentioning this. You should be able to clear T16 relatively quickly next season with the all kills especially. Helping that elite damage, and the multiplier is going to be huge for clearing T16 earlier in season. It's just such a fast build for clearing Nephilim Rifts that I feel like I'm honor bound to mention it in the very least. So I'll be coming out with a new guide for this as well soon. So I hope you enjoy all of these early season options, the LOD and the Tal Frozen Orb, and then the Firebirds and the Virgin Toto. Thank you for watching.